Hello my dear friend, how are you? Welcome back for listen real and interesting story, so let me start. This story is on husband and wife which not do sex from a long 2 years. So let me start it with its Reddit title is. It's been 2 years without sex with my wife and I'm about to lose my fucking mind. My wife has a physically demanding job that takes a lot out of her every day. Her body goes through so much due to the nature of her work. She works long hours, often doing hard physical labor that requires strength and endurance. On top of that, she is still breastfeeding our baby, which already takes a significant toll on her body. She has to balance both these demands and still manage to keep everything together at home. By the time she finishes her day, she is absolutely exhausted, completely worn out from all the work she's done. The combination of physical labor and breastfeeding, along with the daily stress of managing our household, leaves her drained. It's tough to see her push through the day, knowing how much she's doing and how much it impacts her energy levels. She works so hard and despite her exhaustion she never complains. She's truly an amazing woman who gives everything she has to take care of us and make sure our family is well cared for. By the end of the day she can barely keep her eyes open and I feel so grateful for everything she does, but I also feel for her knowing how much she sacrifices. She does it all and it's a lot to carry, but she handles it with such strength and grace. I've really tried to be patient and understanding, especially with everything going on with our almost 2-year-old. I try not to put any pressure on her for intimacy, knowing that she's already dealing with so much in her day-to-day life. She's been under a lot of stress lately and I don't want to add to that, so I've been holding back. But the truth is it's been really tough on me. She's never been the most sexual person and I understand that, but as the years have passed, her libido has diminished quite a bit. It used to be that we'd have some kind of intimate connection more frequently, but that's become less and less over time. She started to prefer offering oral sex and I've always appreciated that. It worked for me for a while, but now it's become less frequent, and it's been months between encounters. It's really difficult for me and it's creating a lot of frustration. It's affecting my mental health and I feel like I'm falling back into old habits. I've started turning to porn again, something I really hate, and that makes me feel depressed and full of shame. I know it's not healthy for me, but sometimes it feels like the only outlet I have. I hate feeling like this and I know it's affecting my relationship with her. It's causing me to pull away emotionally and struggle with my self-esteem. I don't want to be resentful, but it's becoming harder to ignore how much this is impacting me. I want to connect with her in a deeper way, but I feel like we're slipping further apart. It's causing so much emotional turmoil and I just don't know what to do anymore. We've had the conversation so many times now and it feels like I'm stuck in a loop. I don't like feeling like I'm being whiny or needy, so I always try my best to stay calm and reasonable. I don't want to come off as overly demanding or ungrateful, especially considering everything she's juggling right now. But the reality is I have needs too, and it's hard for me to continue pretending that everything is fine when it's not. I've tried to express this in a way that isn't confrontational, but it's clear that the longer it goes on, the more frustrated I become. She has agreed to try to make some time for intimacy, even if it's just once a week or once every 2 weeks. I've been holding on to that hope, thinking that maybe things could improve slowly. But honestly, it's been hard to gauge how much progress we've really made. Every time we discuss it, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells, afraid that I'll come across as too much or that I'll push her away by asking for what I need. She seems willing to try, but the reality is that the effort is often short-lived, and it's hard not to feel discouraged. I don't want to pressure her, but I also feel like my needs are being neglected, and it's starting to weigh on me more and more. It's hard to talk about this without feeling guilty or ashamed for even bringing it up, but the truth is, it's been eating away at me for so long now that I can't just keep pushing it aside. I don't want to sound selfish or like I'm not considerate of her feelings or what she's going through, but at the same time, I can't ignore the fact that I have emotional and physical needs that are not being met. It feels like this constant battle inside me, trying to balance my understanding of her situation with the growing feeling that I'm losing a part of myself in the process. Months have gone by and every step of the way I feel like I have to beg. It's degrading. It's exhausting. It's breaking me. I'm so lonely that I can hardly even describe it anymore. She's on my mind all the time, to the point where I sit here with this overwhelming tension, this unrelenting ache, and it's almost unbearable. I feel ridiculous even thinking this way, but it's my reality. She said I'd get some relief last night, but then the baby stayed up late and that was the end of it. Now it's the next night and the baby went to bed early this time, but she's fallen asleep conveniently again, and I can't help but feel this gnawing frustration. It's like I'm crawling out of my own skin, trying to fend off these urges that keep building like I'm some kind of addict fighting against an overwhelming compulsion. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this, or even what I'm supposed to do about it anymore. I'm trapped in this cycle of wanting to be supportive and understanding but feeling increasingly invisible and disconnected in the process. He posted an update. After considering everyone's advice and reflecting, I had a big talk with my wife. Here's what happened. The deadbeat question. Midday I asked her if she felt I could be doing more with my son or house upkeep. She said she appreciated me asking but felt we had a good balance. Her response was calm and understanding. She didn't seem to have any complaints or feel burdened. I could tell she was grateful that I took the time to ask and check in, but it didn't seem like there was a need for significant changes from her perspective. Later that night, after picking up dinner, I continued reading more comments and advice I had gathered from various people. I spent some time reflecting on the situation, thinking through what others had said and what I believed might be areas for improvement. I decided to dig deep, not just to address her concerns, but also to evaluate my own contributions to the household, our relationship, and the way I've been managing my responsibilities. Surprisingly, as I was stepping out of the shower, my wife was standing there waiting for me. She looked at me and asked if I wanted a BJ, catching me completely off guard. It was unexpected, especially since she had known I'd been wanting something more since Wednesday. This was the first time the timing felt right, with the baby finally asleep and no massage work earlier in the day to leave her exhausted. It felt like the stars had aligned for just a moment, and I couldn't help but feel a wave of relief at the gesture, even though it was just the start of what I felt we needed to address. In that moment I felt like I couldn't hold back anymore. I told her everything. I opened up completely and shared what had been weighing on me for so long. I apologized for not giving her more non-sexual intimacy and for not always being mindful of how my actions or inactions might make her feel. I apologized for the times I'd let my frustration get the better of me, for the moments when I had added to the demands on her shoulders instead of trying to ease her burden. I tried to be as honest as I could about how much I valued her and everything she does while also admitting where I knew I had fallen short. I asked her how she was feeling in her own body, whether she was truly okay or if there was something she hadn't been able to express to me. I wanted to understand her experience better, to know if there was anything I could do to make things easier for her or to help her feel more comfortable and supported. It wasn't easy to say all of this, to lay it all out there without knowing how she might respond, but it felt necessary. For the first time in what felt like forever, it felt like we were finally taking a step toward bridging the gap that had grown between us. Surprisingly, it turned out she wasn't completely okay. She shared with me that there was something going on with her body that I hadn't known about, something that had been affecting her in ways I hadn't fully realized. Hearing this made me feel a mix of emotions, concern for her well-being and a sense of regret for not having noticed or asked sooner. She told me she was going to see a doctor about it, and I could tell it was something that had been weighing on her for a while. I reassured her that I supported her and that her health and comfort mattered more than anything. I also asked her something I'd been holding back for a long time, afraid of what the answer might be. I asked if she found it gross or off-putting that I would ask for head during those rare, tiny windows when the baby was finally asleep and things were calm. Her response surprised and reassured me. She said not at all, that it wasn't something she found disgusting or inappropriate in the slightest. She admitted, however, that she sometimes felt guilty when she didn't feel up to it, as though she was letting me down in some way. But she made it clear that it was okay for me to ask and that it wasn't something I should feel ashamed about. This honesty between us, though long overdue, felt like a step forward. It was like we were finally peeling back the layers of misunderstanding and miscommunication that had built up over time, starting to address the things we'd both been carrying silently. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it felt like progress, like we were at least starting to understand each other better and to rebuild the connection that had felt so strained. Then came the best part. After everything we had shared, we sat down and had a long, meaningful chat about how we had been letting our connection and priorities slip, especially when it came to carving out time for ourselves and each other. We talked about the importance of both solo time and date time, realizing just how much we had let this whole thing get away from us in the chaos of raising our son. But now that he was old enough and a little more independent, we both agreed it was time to start making an effort again, to reconnect and find moments for each other amidst everything else. We fantasized about all the little things we could do again, even if it was just for a short window here and there, sharing a coffee date, sneaking off for a quick walk, or just sitting together without distractions. It felt good to imagine these moments and know that we were both committed to making them happen. We agreed to ease back into our sex life naturally, letting it come as it felt right for both of us, without pressure or expectations. And then came the second best part. She surprised me by giving me the deluxe blowjob package complete with all the fixings. It was an intimate and generous gesture, especially given that she wasn't quite ready to have her own body touched sexually yet. Even so, the night didn't end there. Afterward, we stayed up together, cuddling close and watching a show. It was simple but deeply comforting, a reminder of how much we still cared for each other and how much we were willing to work toward getting back to a better place. Thanks to everyone who shared their stories and offered tough but truthful advice. It meant a lot to hear from those who took the time to understand where I was coming from and provide perspective that helped me see things more clearly. However, to those who advised me to cheat, I genuinely hope you rethink your lives and the kind of values you're projecting. That path was never an option for me, and suggesting it felt like a disservice to both my situation and to relationships in general. To the people who pushed me toward porn as a solution, you need to understand that it's like offering beer to an alcoholic. It's not something that works for me, and I've been very clear about why it's not a healthy outlet in my life. The advice came off as dismissive of the deeper issues at play, and that was disappointing. And finally, to those who came at me with an axe to grind, assuming I'm some kind of slob or deadbeat, I'm genuinely sorry that your experiences have left such a negative impression of men in relationships. It's disheartening to see how many examples there are that make this the first thing people jump to. I acknowledge that me and a lot of men have to do better in relationships, and I'm committed to being part of that change. But stereotyping and shaming don't help anyone. They only widen the gap between understanding and progress. He has edited this update post. The majority of comments in this thread are about communication, but there's one missing ingredient: self-awareness. You can talk for days and days and still miss your own. He has posted an update on July 29, 2024. Well, it's about to be 3 years without sex with my wife, and I've been grappling with how to handle this reality. A few days ago, I went to a strip club, not something I do often, but something about the situation felt like a breaking point for me. And while I was there, something strange happened that I wasn't entirely expecting. Looking back, I remember my first post where I got beat up pretty hard for not pulling my weight in the household, for not prioritizing non-sexual intimacy, and for not communicating as well as I should have. It was a tough pill to swallow, but it made me reflect on a lot of things I wasn't doing right or could be doing better. Then came my second post where my wife and I had that game-changing conversation. It was during that talk that I learned she had been dealing with a post-birth exacerbation of a pre-existing condition that made her lady parts not great, to say the least. It was a light bulb moment for me, realizing just how much she'd been struggling physically and emotionally while I was stuck in my own frustration. That conversation was supposed to be a turning point, and it was in some ways. But here I am, 3 years later, still trying to navigate this deeply challenging situation without losing sight of what matters most: our relationship, our family, and my commitment to her as a partner. Since post 2, our lives have only gotten busier and more stressful. It feels like the demands on us keep stacking up with no end in sight. Our kid has become more of a handful than ever, and just keeping up with him takes so much energy. On top of that, we've been drowning in a variety of homeowner projects that are draining us physically, mentally, and financially. It honestly feels like everything is breaking around here, both in our house and in our lives, and the constant stress is starting to feel insurmountable. One of the biggest adjustments has been with our sleeping arrangements. Our kid has grown and started sleeping in our bed, which has pushed me to move into his bedroom for now. Strangely enough, this setup actually helps everyone sleep better at night, at least for the time being. But of course, the downside is that it's put any chance of intimacy or connection on hold indefinitely. Needless to say, there is zero sex happening under these circumstances, and it's hard to even imagine when that might change. The distance feels wider than ever, and while I understand that this is just a phase of life, it doesn't make it any less challenging to deal with day after day. But in post 2, my wife did say that while she wasn't ready for sex yet, she'd be open to being forthcoming with giving me blowjobs when I needed them. I've tried to pick good moments, being mindful of the things she's dealing with. I've made sure not to ask on days when she's been working hard physically, when she's exhausted from household tasks, or when she's dealing with other stresses. I've tried to time it for the days when the house is in order, when we're not overwhelmed by projects, or when she's not on her period. Mostly, I've looked for the days when we've been able to share some non-sexual intimacy, whether that's just sitting together, talking, or doing something simple like holding hands. I try to make sure the moments feel right, and that they don't add pressure or make her feel like I'm demanding something when she's not in a place to give it. Still, even with these efforts, it hasn't been the same as before. The emotional and physical distance remains, and it's hard to tell how long we can keep things in this pattern. It's become this desperate waiting game, constantly on the lookout for that spare 15-minute window where I don't feel ashamed or like I'm imposing by asking for some form of companionship and release. It's not about just needing the physical act, but about feeling a sense of connection, intimacy, something to break the growing distance between us. But the whole process has made me feel like I'm constantly walking this thin line, trying to find the right moment without pressuring her, without making her feel burdened or uncomfortable. But it's hard. I can't help but feel like a pervert, like I'm somehow doing something wrong by even asking for a blowjob. There's this sense of desperation, this frustration that's built up over so much time, and it feels like I'm sneaking around to beg for something I shouldn't have to ask for. It's not about guilt in the sense of wanting something, it's about the way it makes me feel when I have to resort to this just to feel close to her in any way. The more I try to navigate it, the more it feels like I'm fighting against a wall of awkwardness and self-doubt. It shouldn't be this way, but it is, and it's getting harder to handle. I can count on one hand the times this has happened. She's agreed each time, just like we discussed, but every single time it's felt so desperate. There's this undercurrent of tension, like I'm grasping at something I'm not sure I can hold on to, and it's hard to shake that feeling. Using the advice I've gotten from before, I decided to just ask her straight up. No beating around the bush. I didn't want to keep guessing or overthinking. I asked her, is this condition you told me about, is that just an excuse because sex is no longer enjoyable to you? Like, just tell me? It was a hard question to ask, and I could feel the weight of it as soon as the words left my mouth. But I needed to know, I needed to understand what was really going on. Was it her condition, or was it something deeper? Something I might not even be aware of? I couldn't keep walking on eggshells, afraid to ask or assume, so I just put it out there, hoping for clarity. She told me that she just hasn't had the time to see a dermatologist, and I completely understood. I know life is busy, and her condition has been something out of her control. I'm not angry or upset about it, and I don't want to pressure her. But the lack of sexual release is starting to twist my insides in ways I didn't expect. It's turning into a constant ache, this gnawing feeling that I can't seem to shake. It's making me do things I'm not proud of. I catch myself stealing glances at other women, looking at them in ways I never wanted to, and it's making me feel lecherous and disgusting. These thoughts are creeping in, and I know they're not healthy. It feels like my body is betraying me, and I'm trying to fight against it. Thirst traps are getting to me more than they should, and every time I scroll through my phone, it feels like I'm being sucked back into something I know I don't want. Porn is slowly creeping back into my periphery too. I've told myself time and again that it's not a healthy outlet, that it's not something I should rely on, but here I am, struggling with the temptation all over again. It's like I'm trapped in this cycle of frustration, unable to release the tension that's building up. I'm not proud of how I'm feeling, but it's the reality of where I'm at right now, and it's eating away at me. Here's something I know to be true: I will never be unfaithful to this woman. She is the love of my life, and the thought of hurting her is the worst thing I can imagine. She's traveling for a few weeks. Being so unbelievably lonely, I went to a strip club. I went to the nicest one in the area, and waited for the most attractive woman who was dancing. There she was. A woman that would have been a lifelong fantasy for me. "How are you doing tonight?" she asks. I admit it. I miss my wife. I'm lonely. She asks if I want to come into the back. Yes. Let's go. She removed her top and began to gyrate in front of me. I waited for that electric feeling, the rush of aliveness that I'd always gotten from this kind of experience in the past. The kind of feeling that would make everything feel intense and alive, like I was plugged into something I had been missing. But it never came. I sat there, expressionless, for 5 minutes just watching her. There was no spark, no thrill, nothing to stir me. I paid her $25, left the club, and walked out into the night feeling strangely empty. I came home, still processing what had just happened. My first thought was the obvious one, the one I was testing. Maybe it's that my wife is the only woman in the world I actually want to be with. Maybe, after all this time, it wasn't about the other women or the desire for variety. Maybe I just aged out of this kind of thing. The thought hit me hard, but it also made sense. I can't say I know for sure what it means yet. But in that moment, it felt like a turning point, like I had just learned something about myself that I hadn't fully understood before. I'm sitting today feeling completely lost, lonely, and depressed. The weight of everything is just too much to carry right now, and I can't shake this feeling of being stuck in a place I don't know how to get out of. I find myself praying that when our kid eventually moves to their own room, maybe we'll have the space to start rebuilding things between us, to finally begin laying a new foundation. Maybe we can work on what we've let slip over the years and find a way back to something that feels like us again. But then there's this nagging thought that keeps creeping in: maybe this is just it. Maybe we've grown apart in ways that can't be fixed. Maybe we've simply aged out of this relationship, out of the intimacy and connection we once had, and that's all there is to it. Maybe we're just incompatible now, and it's time to face the reality that what we've been trying to hold on to is no longer sustainable. It's hard to know what to believe, and harder still to figure out what the next step should be. I'm lost, and I feel like I'm standing on the edge of something I'm too afraid to jump into. You guys were helpful before. What should I do? He posted an update on December 11th, 2024. It's been 3 years and I've had sex with my wife precisely once in that time. It's been a long stretch of frustration, and I don't think I can fully describe how much I've missed the closeness and intimacy we once had. She did finally see a specialist after waiting more than 6 months, and we learned that she has a few health issues going on. One of them was so serious and frightening that we both sat there and cried when she shared the news with me. It was a heavy moment, and I understood in that instant how much she had been dealing with physically and emotionally. Despite everything though, we did manage to make some time for ourselves this year. On my birthday we decided to go out for a dinner and show, and even stayed in a hotel room for the night. Our kid was with a babysitter, and for a few hours, we were able to focus on each other without the usual stresses of daily life. It was a small but meaningful moment. Still, even with the night away, there's this lingering sense of distance and longing that remains, and I can't help but wonder how we can bridge that gap moving forward. To my surprise, she came into the hotel wearing new lingerie. She's not the most sexually expressive person, being a victim of sexual assault in the past, so this was like a big deal. We had sex that night, then we had sex again in the morning. It was really fun, but I could tell she was still in pain, or at least not physically comfortable. She was putting herself out there despite it not being great for her. I was torn between enjoying myself in those moments, but also wanting her to feel okay and enjoy herself too. I offered her oral sex or a massage, thinking that might help her feel more comfortable or relaxed, but she didn't really feel up to either of those. It became clear to me that she truly doesn't feel healthy in her own body right now. I could sense that, and it made me feel even more conflicted because I didn't want to pressure her in any way, but I also wanted to be close to her. So, things are still not amazing in our sex life. The connection we used to have in that regard is still distant, and I can't pretend that it's not a source of frustration. But for all the people who have told us that our marriage is dead or that we're heading toward cheating, I don't think they understand what it really means to love someone with every fiber of your being. Do I wish we had more sex? Yes, of course. But at the same time, I wouldn't trade the moments we still share, raising our kid together, holding hands while we watch movies, being there for each other through thick and thin, for anything. That deep, lasting bond we have, the kind that goes beyond just physical intimacy, is something I wouldn't give up for anything. It's a different kind of love, but it's still love. I don't really know exactly where to go from here. She feels like the medicines she's supposed to take have terrifying side effects, and I can't blame her for being hesitant. It's not an easy decision to make, especially when the potential consequences are so serious. I'm not going to force her into taking something just so I can have sex with her. That's not the kind of partner I want to be. Her health and well-being come first, and I need to respect that, even though it's hard for me. I know that what we're dealing with isn't something that can be fixed quickly, and it's frustrating. I just wish there was a clear solution, but there's so much uncertainty around her health and the best way to move forward. I don't want her to feel pressured or like she's being forced into a decision she's not comfortable with, but at the same time, I'm struggling with my own needs and the distance between us. It's a difficult place to be in, and I'm not sure where to go from here. Yes, she's still tossing me maintenance blowjobs, but it's like once a month now. Our lives are super busy. I don't want to pile on her after an exhausting day of work. I'm going to talk to her about once or twice a week, but it really is hard. Between waking up to walk the dog, make breakfast, get the kid to daycare, work our days, clean the house, make dinner, pick up the kid, bath time, bedtime, and any spare time for personal projects, it's just fucking exhausting. So, who knows what to do now? Here is end of the posted update. We'll get back to you with this post updates. If you enjoy our videos, so don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Have a good day, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do it and hit the notification bell icon to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.